I stood shivering outside my parents' gate, gripping the freezing hand of the homeless boy I had taken in. Divorced, fired, and disowned during a storm. I thought I had hit rock bottom. Then the child looked up through the rain and whispered that his father was a billionaire. I assumed it was a fantasy, never guessing that one sentence would spark a war with the elite and deliver the sweetest revenge against the family who abandoned me. My name is Natalie Pierce, and at 32 years old, I was fairly certain I was looking at the end of my life, or at least, the end of the life I had been trained to want. The windshield wipers of my sedan were fighting a losing battle against the deluge that battered the glass, screeching a rhythmic, mournful protest with every sweep. Beside me in the passenger seat, Eli sat with his knees pulled up to his chest, his small frame trembling beneath a thin gray blanket that smelled faintly of motor oil and stale laundry. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. We were crossing the bridge into Riversend, the town where I had grown up, a place where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the curtains were always twitching. It was a town built on appearances, and right now, I was the walking, breathing definition of a disaster. My life had unraveled with terrifying speed over the last 7 days. First came the finalization of the divorce from Travis, a man who viewed marriage as a merger and affection as a leverageable asset. He had taken the house, the accounts, and my dignity, leaving me with a settlement that barely covered my legal fees. Then, 48 hours ago, Lighthouse Reach Media, the small marketing firm where I had poured my soul into copywriting to distract myself from my failing marriage, had announced immediate downsizing. I was the first to go. I had exactly $112 in my checking account. My credit cards were maxed out from the legal battle, and I had Eli. I looked over at him. He was staring out the window at the blurred streetlights, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from when we had run to the car. He looked younger than 10. His eyes, usually a vibrant, intelligent blue, were dull with fever and exhaustion. I had found him, fought for him, and now I was dragging him into the lion's den because I had nowhere else to go. "We are almost there," I said, forcing a steadiness into my voice that I did not feel. "My parents have a big house. It is warm. They will have soup. You just need to sleep. Eli, I will handle the rest." Eli did not answer, but he reached out and took my hand. His fingers were ice cold. I pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial on Elm Street. The house stood like a beacon of moral superiority in the storm. The porch light was on, casting a golden glow over the pristine white siding and the perfectly trimmed hedges that my father, Gerald, tended to with obsessive devotion. It was a house that screamed stability. It was the house where I had learned that love was conditional and that mistakes were not learning experiences, but stains on the family resume. I killed the engine. The silence inside the car was heavy. "Come on," I whispered. We stepped out into the rain. It was a torrential downpour, the kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds. I grabbed our 2 duffel bags, everything I owned in the world, and ushered Eli up the brick walkway. He huddled against my side, trying to make himself small, trying to disappear. I rang the doorbell. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough to drown out the thunder. It took 2 minutes for the door to open. My mother, Linda, stood there. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan and pearls, her silver hair coiffed into an immobile helmet of perfection. The smell of pot roast and furniture polish wafted out, a scent so familiar it made my stomach cramp with hunger. Her eyes went wide as they took us in. Me, with my mascara running down my face and my cheap coat soaked through. Eli, in his torn jeans and oversized hoodie, clutching my hand like a lifeline. "Natalie?" she gasped, clutching her throat. "Glorious God, look at you. What happened? Why are you here at this hour?" "Can we come in, Mom?" I asked, my teeth chattering. "Please, it is freezing." She hesitated. That hesitation cut deeper than the cold wind. She looked past me to the street, checking to see if any neighbors were watching, before stepping back just enough to let us into the foyer. She did not hug me. She did not offer a towel. She looked at the puddle forming around our feet on her polished hardwood floor with undisguised irritation. "Gerald!" she called out, her voice shrill. "Gerald, come down here. You are not going to believe this." My father appeared from the living room, holding a newspaper. He was a tall man, imposing, with the kind of stern jawline that suggested he had never told a joke in his life. He was a deacon at the First Baptist Church of Riversend, a man who believed poverty was a result of moral failing and that wealth was a sign of divine favor. He stopped dead when he saw us. His eyes narrowed behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Dad, I need help," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I know I should have called, but everything happened so fast. I lost the apartment. I lost the job at the agency. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks. Just until I get back on my feet. I will find work. I will clean the house. I will do anything." Gerald stared at me. Then his gaze shifted to Eli. The look on his face was not curiosity, it was revulsion. He looked at Eli the way one looks at a cockroach that has scurried across a clean counter. "Who is this?" Gerald demanded, pointing a finger at the boy. "Why have you brought a stray into my house?" Eli flinched and pressed his face into my wet coat. I squeezed his hand tighter. "This is Eli," I said, lifting my chin. "I am his guardian. I told you about him on the phone last Christmas. The state granted me kinship-like care rights because you are foolish," my mother cut in, her lips thinning into a harsh line. "We thought you were joking. Natalie, you are barely taking care of yourself, and you pick up some child from the street? Look at him. He is filthy. He smells." "He is sick, Mom," I pleaded. "He has a fever. He just needs a warm bed for a night or two. Please, you have 3 empty bedrooms." "He is not family," Gerald spat. "He is baggage. And what does Travis think of this? Does your husband know you are running around the state with a homeless boy?" I closed my eyes for a second, bracing myself. This was the part that would shatter everything. "Travis and I are divorced, Dad," I said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like gunshots. "Divorced?" Gerald's face turned a mottled shade of red. You divorced Travis? A partner at a law firm? A man who provided you with a home in Northbridge? A man from a good family?" "He was controlling, Dad. He was suffocating me. He made me cut off my friends. He tracked my spending. He was a husband!" Gerald roared, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. Eli whimpered, and I put a protective arm around his shoulders. "He was a successful man who was willing to put up with your mediocrity. And you left him? For what? To play savior to some gutter rat?" "He is not a rat," I snapped, anger finally flaring through my exhaustion. "He is a child, and he is a better human being than Travis ever was." "Do not you dare speak to your father that way," Linda hissed, stepping forward. "Do you have any idea what this will do to us? To our standing in the church? The Pierces do not get divorced. We do not drag strays into our home and air our dirty laundry for the whole town to smell. You have humiliated us. Natalie, again." "I have humiliated you?" I looked between them, feeling the last tenuous threads of my childhood bond snapping. "I am standing here, soaking wet, with a sick child, begging for help, and you are worried about what Mrs. Higgins in the choir will think?" "We are worried about standards," Gerald said, cold as ice. He walked to the front door and threw it open. The wind howled, spraying rain into the warm foyer. "And you do not meet them." I froze. "What are you doing?" "Get out," Gerald said. "Dad, it is storming. We have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you threw away a good marriage and a good life," he said. "I will not have you poisoning this house with your failures, and I certainly will not have that boy here. We are respectable people, Natalie. We do not harbor runaways in charity cases." "Mom?" I looked at her, searching for a shred of maternal instinct. Linda looked away, smoothing the fabric of her cardigan. You made your bed, Natalie. Now you have to lie in it, or sleep in your car. It makes no difference to me. From this moment on, we do not have a daughter named Natalie." The cruelty of it took the breath from my lungs. It was physical, a blow to the chest that left me gasping. "Out!" Gerald shouted, making a move toward us. I grabbed the handle of the duffel bag. I did not want them to touch me. I did not want them to touch Eli. I turned around, shielding the boy with my body, and stepped back out into the deluge. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind us with a finality that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the loudest thing I had ever heard. We were alone. The rain was colder now. Or maybe I was just numb. We stood on the porch for a moment, the water pooling around our feet. I looked down at Eli. I had failed him. I had promised him safety, and I had delivered him to a doorstep of judgment and rejection. "I am so sorry. Eli," I choked out, wiping water and tears from my face. "I am so sorry. We will figure this out. We will sleep in the car tonight. I have blankets. It will be okay." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip my jacket. I felt like I was drowning, standing on dry land. Then, Eli tugged on my sleeve. I looked down. He was not crying. He was not looking at the closed door with longing or fear. He was looking at me. His blue eyes, usually soft and shy, were suddenly piercing. They held a strange, calm intensity that seemed out of place in a shivering child. He squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Miss Natalie," he said. His voice was quiet, barely audible over the wind, but the words were distinct. "Do not be scared." "We are going to be fine," I lied, trying to smile. "We are," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. He looked back at the house, then turned his gaze up to me. "My dad. He is not gone. I remember now." I brushed a wet strand of hair from his forehead. "It is okay, honey. Let us just get to the car." "No, listen," he insisted. "My dad is really rich. He is a billionaire." I stared at him. The rain ran down his face like tears he refused to shed. I let out a short, hollow laugh. A billionaire. It was the kind of thing a child invented to protect himself from the cold reality of a world that threw him away. It was a fairy tale. "Okay, Eli," I whispered, steering him toward the car. "Okay." "I just need to find him," he said, and for the first time, his voice did not sound like a child's wish. It sounded like a promise. "He will fix this." I did not believe him, not then. I opened the car door and ushered him into the back seat, thinking only of how to keep us warm for the night. I did not know that the boy sitting in my back seat was holding a grenade that was about to blow the roof off the life of everyone who had just shut the door in our faces. To understand why I was currently freezing in a sedan in Riversend, you have to understand the life I voluntarily dismantled 3 years ago in Northbridge. It was a life that looked, from the outside, like a glossy magazine spread on modern happiness. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex called the Meridian. It was the kind of place where the lobby smelled of white tea, and the neighbors nodded politely, but never held the elevator door. My husband, Travis Cole, loved it. He said it projected the right image for a junior partner on the rise. Travis was all about trajectory. He treated our marriage not as a partnership, but as a carefully managed portfolio that required constant auditing. On our living room wall, we had a gallery of black and white wedding photos. In them, we looked deliriously happy. Travis, handsome in his tailored suit, and me, gazing up at him with adoration. The people at our church called us the golden couple. They would squeeze my arm after Sunday service and tell me how lucky I was to have a man so devoted, so driven, and I would smile and agree, because to disagree would be to admit that I was slowly suffocating. Travis controlled everything, though he never raised a hand to me. He did not have to. He used spreadsheets and logical discussions to shrink my world until it fit into his pocket. He picked out my clothes, claiming he had a better eye for what was appropriate for a lawyer's wife. He managed our finances entirely, giving me a modest allowance from my own paycheck because, as he often reminded me, I was too emotional with money. "I know what is best for us, Natalie," he would say, his voice calm and reasonable, usually while denying me permission to visit my college friends or vetoing a vacation I wanted to take. "We have a 5-year plan. We cannot get distracted." The distraction arrived on a Tuesday in November, and it did not look like part of anyone's 5-year plan. I was working late at the marketing agency, trying to finish a campaign for a local dental practice. By the time I clocked out, it was past 9 in the evening. The wind was biting, cutting through my coat as I walked to my car, which was parked behind a row of shops to save on the garage fees Travis hated paying. As I passed the back of a bakery, a place that usually smelled of yeast and sugar, I heard a sound. It was not a raccoon or a stray cat. It was a cough, a wet, rattling human cough. I stopped. The sensible part of my brain, the part Travis had spent years training, told me to keep walking. It told me it was dangerous, but something in the pitch of that cough made my feet turn toward the dumpsters. There, wedged between a stack of blue crates and the brick wall, was a pile of rags. As I stepped closer, the rags moved. A face peered out. It was a boy, no older than 8, his skin pale and smeared with grime. He was wearing a thin, oversized hoodie that offered zero protection against the 30-degree weather. He was shaking so violently that his teeth were chattering in a staccato rhythm. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down but keeping my distance. "Are you okay?" He flinched, pressing his back against the cold bricks. His eyes were wide and terrified. "I am not doing anything," he stammered. "I am just sleeping." My heart broke. No child should have to apologize for sleeping. I remembered the untouched blueberry muffin I had in my purse, a leftover from the office break room. I fished it out and held it toward him. "I am not going to hurt you," I said. "Here, are you hungry?" He looked at the muffin, then at me, and snatched it with a speed that spoke of starvation. He ate it in 3 bites, choking it down. "Where are your parents?" I asked. He wiped crumbs from his mouth with a dirty sleeve. "Gone." "Gone where?" "I do not know," he whispered. I woke up under a bridge. It was dark. My dad was not there." "Where do you live?" He frowned, looking confused. "It was a big house, with a gate, and water, but then we were on a boat, and then, I do not remember." It sounded like the ramblings of trauma, or perhaps a vivid imagination coping with abandonment. I could not leave him there. I called the police, and I waited with him until a patrol car arrived. They took him in, and I followed them to the station, feeling a strange tether to this lost boy. The next 48 hours were a blur of bureaucracy. The police found no missing persons report matching his description. He did not know his last name, only Eli. He did not know his address or a phone number. The social worker, a weary woman named Mrs. Higgins, told me the system was overloaded. There were no foster beds available in the immediate vicinity within Northbridge. "He is a John Doe for now," she told me, rubbing her temples. "We will put him in a group shelter 2 counties over until we identify him." I looked at Eli, sitting on a hard plastic chair in the hallway, swinging his legs. He looked small and utterly alone. The thought of him in a crowded shelter, scared and nameless, made me physically ill. "Is there another option?" I asked. Mrs. Higgins looked at me, gauging my sincerity. "Well, you found him. You have a clean record. We could do an emergency kinship-like placement. It is rare for non-relatives. But given the overcrowding and your immediate bond, I could sign off on a temporary custody arrangement while we investigate, but it is a lot of work." "I will do it," I said. I did not hesitate. For the first time in years, I did not consult the spreadsheet. I did not call Travis. I just said yes. Bringing Eli home was like dropping a bomb into the sanitized museum of our apartment. When Travis walked in that evening and saw a dirty, skinny boy sitting at our glass dining table eating a bowl of pasta, he dropped his briefcase. "Natalie," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What is this?" This is Eli, I said, standing between them. He has nowhere to go. I am fostering him temporarily. Travis stared at me as if I had spoken in tongues. He pulled me into the bedroom and shut the door. Have you lost your mind? He hissed. You brought a homeless child into our house without asking me? Do you know the liability? What if he steals? What if he has diseases? He is a child, Travis. He was freezing to death behind a dumpster. That is what shelters are for, Travis argued, pacing the room. This is not our problem. We are on a track. Natalie, we are saving for a house in the hills. We are planning to start trying for a baby in 2 years. When I make senior partner, this interferes with everything. It is temporary, I insisted, though a part of me already knew I would fight to keep him. And I do not care about the track right now. I care about him. You are being impulsive, he sneered. You are trying to fill some void because you are bored with your job. This is selfish. Natalie, it is not charity. It is a pet project. His words stung, but they did not stop me. For the first time, his disapproval did not make me crumble. It made me defiant. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. It became a battleground of silence. Travis ignored Eli completely. He would walk past the boy as if he were a piece of furniture, refusing to make eye contact. He started working later and later, claiming he had important briefs to file, but I knew he just did not want to be in the same room as the street rat, as he once called him when he thought I was not listening. But for me, the apartment came alive. I used my own money I had secretly squirreled away from freelance design gigs I had never told Travis about, to buy Eli clothes. I bought him soft flannel pajamas, new sneakers, and a backpack. I took him to the doctor to treat his malnutrition and get his shots. I watched Eli transform. The terrified, shaking creature from the dumpster slowly unfurled. I learned that he loved drawing. He would spend hours sketching intricate ships and houses on the backs of my old work papers. I learned he had a gentle laugh that started in his belly and made his eyes crinkle. One evening, we were making cookies in the kitchen. Flour was everywhere, a mess that would have given Travis an aneurysm. Eli looked up at me, his face dusted with white powder. Miss Natalie? He asked. Yeah, Bud? Is this what a mom does? I stopped stirring. Is what a mom does? Bake cookies, and make sure you have socks. Tears pricked my eyes. Yeah, Eli, this is what a mom does. He nodded solemnly. I like it. In that moment, standing in my flour-covered kitchen, I felt a surge of warmth that no compliment from the church ladies or perfect dinner with Travis had ever given me. I felt like I had a family, a real one, not a staged photo op, but a messy, breathing, loving unit. Travis came home an hour later. He saw the flour on the counter and the boy sitting on the stool. He did not say a word. He just walked to the bedroom and slammed the door. The lines were drawn. I had chosen the boy over the plan. I had chosen humanity over the image. I knew our marriage was cracking. I knew Travis was pulling away, his resentment festering like a wound, but I did not care. I had saved Eli, and in a way, he was saving me. I just did not know that the price for this salvation would be total destruction. I did not know that by bringing this boy into our lives, I had set a timer on my own existence in Northbridge. Travis was a lawyer. After all, he knew how to win, and he knew how to make his opponent suffer. And I was about to become the opponent. The shift in our marriage did not happen with a bang, but with the quiet, suffocating slide of a lock clicking into place. It began when Travis's firm, Cole and Marston, secured a retainer with a massive technology conglomerate. He never said the name of the client, claiming attorney-client privilege, but the change in him was immediate and terrifying. He started coming home long after midnight, smelling of expensive scotch and a perfume that was decidedly not mine. He became glued to his phone, guarding the screen like it held nuclear launch codes. When he did speak to me, it was with a sneering condescension, as if I were a slow-witted child he was forced to tolerate. You lack ambition, Natalie, He told me one evening over a dinner he had barely touched. You are content with mediocrity. It is exhausting trying to drag you up to my level. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. 3 months after Eli had moved in, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find Travis's side of the bed empty. I found him on the balcony, speaking in hushed, intimate tones into his phone. When he saw me, he hung up immediately, but not before I heard him say, "I know, Veronica. Soon." I snatched the phone from the table before he could lock it. The text thread was open. Veronica Dale. I knew the name. She was a wealthy real estate heiress, a new client he had mentioned in passing. The messages were explicit, detailing hotel rooms and future plans that did not include me. "You are cheating on me," I said, my voice trembling not with sadness, but with a cold fury. Travis did not panic. He did not apologize. He simply took the phone from my hand, slipped it into his pocket, and looked at me with a pitying expression that made my skin crawl. "You are paranoid. Natalie," he said smoothly. "Veronica is a client. We are working on a merger. Those texts? You are reading into things because you are unstable. You have been spiraling ever since you brought that boy into this house. It is affecting your mind." "I saw what I saw, Travis." "You see what you want to see because you are sick," he countered, stepping closer, looming over me. "Maybe I should have you evaluated. A woman who obsesses over a street kid and hallucinates affairs. That does not look good." The divorce papers arrived 2 days later. The process was not a negotiation. It was a slaughter. Travis hired Marcus Thorne, a senior partner at his own firm, a man known in legal circles as the Butcher. They did not just want to end the marriage, they wanted to delegitimize my existence. The courtroom was cold, smelling of floor wax and old wood. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, while Travis and Marcus sat on the other side, looking like a wall of dark wool suits. "Your Honor," Marcus said, pacing before the judge, "Mrs. Cole has exhibited a pattern of erratic behavior and emotional instability. She has formed an unnatural, obsessive attachment to a homeless minor, effectively replacing her marital obligations with a fixation on a stranger. This kinship care she speaks of is nothing more than a manifestation of her own psychological dependency." I gripped the edge of the table. They were twisting my act of kindness into a pathology. They made my love for Eli sound like a sickness. She spent thousands of dollars of marital funds on this child without her husband's consent. Marcus continued, waving a stack of bank statements. "She is financially irresponsible and emotionally volatile. Mr. Cole is merely seeking to extricate himself from a toxic environment." When it came to the division of assets, I was obliterated. Travis had moved everything. The savings account we had built for 5 years, empty, the investment portfolio, transferred to holding companies and LLCs that I had never heard of. All perfectly legal on paper, all untouchable. "Mr. Cole's assets are tied up in corporate liabilities," the judge ruled, looking at the complex web of documents Travis had provided. "The liquid assets are negligible." I was leaving a marriage to a man who made 6 figures, and I was walking away with $4,000 and a 10-year-old sedan. But the worst blow did not come from the judge. It came from my parents. I had called them the night Travis served me the papers. I had cried, explaining the affair, the gaslighting, the cruelty. They had listened in silence. A week before the final decree, there was a knock on the door of the apartment I was still sharing with Travis, an arrangement that was pure torture. I opened it to find Gerald and Linda standing there. "Mom, Dad," I breathed, relief washing over me. "Thank God you came." I moved to hug my mother, but she took a step back. She was holding a cardboard box. "We came to return your things," she said stiffly. "What?" "Travis called us," Gerald said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "He explained everything. He told us about your episodes, about how you have been neglecting your duties as a wife to play house with that boy." "He is lying," I cried. "He is cheating on me with a client." "Travis is a good man," Linda snapped. "He offered to pay for a therapist for you, Natalie. He wanted to make it work, but you refused. You chose to destroy your marriage. He has manipulated you, I said, realizing with horror that they had been charmed by the same legal prowess that was destroying me in court. We cannot support this behavior, Gerald said, placing a key on the entry table. It was the spare key to their house in Riversend, the one I had kept on my keychain since I was 16. We do not want you coming around the house until you get your head straight. You have embarrassed us enough. You are taking his side? I asked, my voice breaking. We are taking the side of truth, Linda said. And the truth is, you traded a husband for a beggar. They left the box of my old high school yearbooks and trophies on the floor and walked out. They did not look back. The day I signed the final papers, the apartment was empty. I had packed my meager belongings and Eli's things into the car. Travis stood by the door, watching us leave. He looked victorious, sleek, and untouched. Sign here, he said, tapping the document that gave me full guardianship of Eli, the only thing I had fought for. I signed, I hope she is worth it. Travis, I hope the money is worth it. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He looked at Eli, who was standing by the elevator, clutching his backpack. You are welcome to him, Travis said, loud enough for Eli to hear. Keep him. Nobody wants that thing anyway. You two deserve each other. Garbage collecting garbage. Eli flinched as if he had been slapped. I saw his shoulders hunch, the old shame returning. I wanted to scream, to claw Travis's eyes out, but I knew that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted the unstable woman to make a scene. Instead, I took Eli's hand. Let us go, Eli. We are done here. We walked out of the Meridian and into a life of immediate, crushing poverty. I found a studio apartment on the bad side of Northbridge. It was a single room with a kitchenette that smelled of mildew and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The rent was $800 a month, which was more than half of what I was making at Lighthouse Reach Media. To make ends meet, I took a second job waiting tables at a diner on the weekends. I picked up freelance graphic design work, designing flyers for dog walkers and church bake sales for $50 a pop. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate instant noodles so Eli could have fresh fruit and chicken. For 6 months, we walked a tightrope. One sick day, one car repair, one unexpected bill would ruin us. And then, the recession hit the marketing sector. I walked into Lighthouse Reach Media on a rainy Monday to find a meeting on my calendar with HR. The conversation was short. Restructuring. Last in, first out. 2 weeks of severance. I packed my desk in a daze. I had lost the anchor that was keeping us from drifting out to sea. That same afternoon, my landlord knocked on the door. He was a greasy man who chewed on toothpicks. Rent is going up next month, he said, not meeting my eyes. Market rates, $1,200. I cannot pay that, I whispered. I just lost my job. He shrugged. Then you have to be out by the 1st. I have a waiting list. The spiral was fast and brutal. I applied for every job I could find, but the market was frozen. The 2 weeks of severance went to paying off the final utility bills and buying non-perishable food. By the time the 1st of the month arrived, I had sold my wedding ring, the one Travis had bought, which turned out to be worth a fraction of what he claimed, just to keep gas in the car. We packed the car again. This time, there was no destination. We slept in a Walmart parking lot the first night. I told Eli it was a camping adventure. He knew I was lying, but he played along, tracing patterns on the foggy window. On the 3rd day, the storm rolled in, a massive system that turned the sky black and flooded the streets. I looked at the gas gauge. We had enough to get to Riversend. I knew my parents had said not to come back. I knew they had disowned me, but I looked at Eli, shivering in the back seat, his face flushed with the fever that had started that morning. I had no pride left. I was a mother, effectively, and a mother does not let her child freeze in a car because she is afraid of a lecture. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. We are going to Grandma and Grandpa's, I told Eli, my voice cracking. Will they like me this time? He asked, his teeth chattering. They have to, I said, gripping the wheel. They have to. I drove through the rain, the windshield wipers screaming against the glass, heading toward the house on Elm Street, toward the door that would slam in my face, and toward the moment that would change everything. I was driving toward rock bottom, unaware that the boy in my back seat was the only parachute I had left. The first 3 nights after my parents slammed the door in our faces were a blur of cold geometry. We were trying to fit 2 human bodies into the back seat of a 10-year-old sedan, a space never designed for sleep. I learned quickly that the most valuable currency in the world was not the dollar, but body heat. We parked behind a defunct garden center on the edge of town, where the overgrown hedges provided a thin shield against the streetlights. I had $23.14 left. I counted it 3 times a day, as if hoping the coins would breed in my pocket. "Are you hungry?" I asked Eli on the second night. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a damp, bone-chilling fog. "A little," he said, his voice muffled by the fleece blanket I had draped over him. I reached into the plastic grocery bag at my feet and pulled out a can of ravioli with a pull-tab lid. It was cold, and the sauce had congealed into a thick orange paste, but to us, it was a lifeline. I handed him the plastic spoon I had swiped from a gas station. "You eat," I said. He took a bite, then paused, holding the spoon out to me. "You too, Miss Natalie?" My stomach gave a violent lurch, a hollow cramping that felt like a fist twisting my insides. I had not eaten a real meal in 48 hours. The smell of the tomato sauce was intoxicating. "I am not hungry, buddy," I lied, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. "I grabbed a big sandwich while you were napping earlier. I am actually stuffed. You finish it. We do not want it to spoil." He looked at me with those perceptive blue eyes, searching for the lie. But his hunger won out. He scraped the can clean. I watched him eat, feeling a strange, fierce pride. I was sleeping in a car. I was wearing the same clothes for 3 days, and my hair was a disaster. But I had kept him fed. I had kept him safe. That had to count for something. On the 4th morning, a tap on the window made me jump. I scrambled to sit up, heart hammering, expecting a police officer telling us to move along. Instead, it was a woman with a kind, tired face and a clipboard. She was wearing a lanyard that identified her as a caseworker for Riversend Social Services. "You cannot stay here, honey," she said through the cracked window. "Not with a minor. It is going to drop below freezing tonight." I rolled the window down further, bracing myself for a lecture. "I have nowhere else to go. My family. It is complicated." "It always is," she said softly. "Look, the shelters in the city are full, but the New Haven Chapel just opened up an overflow space in their basement. It is not the Ritz, but it is warm, and they have a shower. I can make a call." I swallowed my pride. It tasted like bile. "Please, thank you." New Haven Chapel was a sprawling brick building on the east side of town. The overflow space was exactly what she had described. A concrete basement filled with rows of folding cots and thin gray mats. The air smelled of industrial cleaner, damp wool, and too many people breathing in a confined space. It was a stark, terrifying reality check. A month ago, I had been discussing marketing strategies for boutique hotels. Now, I was guarding a 3-foot perimeter around a cot with my life. "Stay close to me," I whispered to Eli as we claimed 2 mats in the corner, away from the main cluster of men. I made it a mission to maintain our dignity. I marched Eli to the communal bathroom, which had seen better days, and made sure he washed his face and brushed his teeth. I used a wet paper towel to smooth down his hair. I refused to let the grime of our situation settle into his skin. "We are just camping indoors," I told him as we settled onto the mats. The lights were dimmed, but the room was never truly dark or quiet. There was always a cough, a snore, or a murmur of a nightmare. Eli lay on his side, facing me. He looked small against the vast, shadowy room. "Miss Natalie?" he whispered. "Yeah, Eli?" I remember more now. I stroked his hair, my heart aching. Since the fever had broken, His memories had become more frequent. I assumed it was a trauma response, his brain inventing a safe harbor to escape the storm of our reality. "What do you remember?" I asked gently. "My dad's name is Lucas," he said, his voice steady and sure. "And he does not wear suits like Travis did. He wears vests, puffy ones, and he has a boat, a really big one with a white flag." "That sounds nice," I said, humoring him. "Maybe he is a captain." "No," Eli insisted, a frustration creeping into his tone. "He is not a captain. He owns the boat. He owns lots of things. He is a billionaire." I sighed internally. The billionaire detail again. It was such a specific, childish exaggeration. It was like saying your dad was Superman. "Okay, Eli," I said, pulling the thin shelter blanket up to his chin. "When we get some money and a computer, we will look for a Lucas with a boat. I promise." "He will find us," Eli said, closing his eyes. "He always wins at hide and seek." I stayed awake for a long time, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, praying that his fantasies would not shatter when reality eventually proved them wrong. 2 days later, the atmosphere in the basement shifted. There was a buzz of excitement during the morning coffee line. "Big spread today," a man named Old Joe told me. He was a veteran who pushed a shopping cart full of books. Real food, not just the soup kitchen slop. Some big corporate charity is coming through. I saw the flyer taped to the peeling paint of the hallway wall a few hours later. It was a glossy, high-resolution poster that looked wildly out of place in the dingy shelter. Langford Dynamics Community Outreach, Feeding Riversend, Fueling Hope, with special guest appearance by founder and CEO, Lucas Langford. I had heard the name Langford Dynamics before. They were a tech giant, the kind of company that built guidance systems for satellites and clean energy grids. They were global, untouchable, and swimming in money. It made sense they would do a PR stunt in a struggling town like Riversend to boost their humanitarian image. "Come on, Eli," I said, grabbing our bags. We never left our bags unattended. "Let us go get in line. If the food is as good as they say, maybe we can save half for tomorrow." We walked toward the serving area, which was set up in the main hall of the church upstairs. The line was already snake-like, wrapping around the pews. As we shuffled forward, Eli stopped dead. I almost tripped over him. "Eli, what is it?" He was staring at a second poster mounted on an easel near the entrance. It featured a large, professional portrait of the CEO. The man in the photo was striking, mid-40s, with piercing eyes and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was wearing a gray suit, but he had a confident, relaxed half-smile that suggested he owned the room without trying. Eli's hand, which was gripping mine, began to tremble. "Eli," I crouched down to his level. "Honey, are you okay?" He lifted a shaking finger and pointed at the poster. "That is him," he whispered. I looked at the poster, then back at the boy. "That is who?" "My dad," Eli said. His voice was breathless, bordering on hyperventilation. "That is Lucas. That is my dad." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty church. I looked at the face of Lucas Langford, one of the wealthiest men in the country, a titan of industry. Then I looked at Eli, a homeless child with holes in his sneakers. "Eli," I said, keeping my voice low so the people around us would not stare. "That is Lucas Langford. He is a very famous man. He is on TV. Maybe you saw him somewhere?" "No." Eli's eyes filled with tears. "I know him. He smells like peppermint and old paper. He used to read to me. He is my dad." My heart sank. The delusion was deeper than I thought. He had latched onto a public figure, projecting his need for a father onto this powerful, safe-looking man on a poster. It was heartbreaking. "Okay," I soothed him, rubbing his back. "Okay, Eli, I hear you." "You do not believe me," he said, pulling away from me. "I believe that you miss your dad," I said carefully. "But right now, we need to eat. Can we please just get some food? I promise we will talk about this later." Eli stared at the poster for one more second, his expression a mix of longing and confusion, Before he nodded, he looked defeated. "Okay," he whispered. We joined the line. The air smelled of roasted turkey and fresh bread, a scent that made my mouth water uncontrollably. I was focused on the meal, on the immediate survival of the next 12 hours. I had no idea that we were not just standing in a food line. We were standing in the crosshairs. I did not know that the man on the poster was currently in the building, just through the double doors, preparing to hand out bread rolls for a photo op. I held Eli's hand tighter, thinking I was protecting him from the disappointment of a fantasy. In reality, I was walking him straight toward a collision that would shatter the carefully constructed lies of a billion-dollar empire. The courtyard of the New Haven Chapel had been transformed into something that felt less like a soup kitchen and more like a film set. What was usually a gray, concrete slab where people smoked cigarettes and stared at their shoes was now buzzing with aggressive energy. There were floodlights mounted on tripods, cutting through the gloom of the overcast afternoon. There were young assistants in headsets running around with clipboards, shouting orders about camera angles and lighting. And then there was us, the hungry, the unwashed, the desperate, lined up like cattle, waiting to be part of the backdrop for a billionaire's moment of benevolence. I kept a tight grip on Eli's hand. He was vibrating against my side, a low-frequency tremor that I initially mistook for cold, but when I looked down, his face was not pale from the chill. It was flushed. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps, his eyes locked on the double doors of the parish hall where the VIPs were emerging. "I remember," Eli whispered, his voice sounding strange, as if he were speaking from underwater. "I remember the water. He was holding me. We were on the big boat, and then I woke up under the bridge." "Eli, stop," I said gently, trying to pull him closer to shield him from the press cameras that were starting to flash. "It is just the hunger talking. Do not look at them. Just look at me." "It is not the hunger," he insisted, looking up at me with a terrifying clarity. "It is him." At that moment, the double doors swung open. A hush fell over the crowd, followed immediately by the rapid-fire click of shutters. Lucas Langford stepped out. In person, he was even more imposing than on the poster. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the house I grew up in. He moved with the easy, athletic grace of a man who owned the space he occupied. He was flanked by a phalanx of security guards, men with earpieces and necks the size of tree trunks, and a trailing comet tail of PR staff. He smiled for the cameras, a practiced, polite expression that did not quite reach his eyes. He began moving down the line of people, shaking hands, handing out boxed meals that an assistant was passing to him. It was mechanical. Shake, smile, hand over box, move on. We were about 10 feet away. The line shuffled forward. I felt Eli's hand rip away from mine. "Eli, no," I hissed, reaching for him. But he did not run. He just took 2 steps forward, breaking the invisible barrier between the charity cases and the benefactor. Lucas was handing a box to an elderly woman when he sensed the movement. He turned, his professional smile still plastered on his face, ready to greet another grateful recipient. His eyes swept over me, the disheveled woman in the cheap coat, without registering anything. Then his gaze dropped to the boy standing in front of me. Time seemed to warp. The noise of the crowd, the shutters, the wind, it all dropped away into a vacuum. Lucas stopped, the box of food in his hands tilted dangerously. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of him. He stared at Eli with the expression of a man seeing a ghost rise from a grave. He looked terrified. Eli stood his ground, though his small frame was shaking violently. He looked up at the titan of industry, his blue eyes locking onto the man's identical gaze. "Dad?" Eli said. It was a small word, spoken softly, but in the sudden, suffocating silence of the immediate vicinity, it landed like a grenade. For a second, nobody moved. Lucas's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like he was about to collapse. Then, the machine kicked in. "Back up," one of the security guards barked, stepping between Lucas and Eli. He viewed the situation through a single lens. A threat, a homeless woman, and a child were accosting the principal. "He is my dad!" Eli cried out, his voice cracking, trying to step around the wall of muscle. "Hey!" I shouted, instinct overriding fear. I lunged forward to grab Eli. "Do not touch him!" The guard did not see a worried mother. He saw an assailant. He shoved me back with a force that sent me stumbling. I tripped over a camera cable and hit the pavement hard, scraping my palms raw. "Get them back!" the head of security yelled. "Secure the perimeter!" Eli screamed when he saw me fall. He tried to run to me, but another guard grabbed his arm. "Let me go!" Eli shrieked, struggling. "Mom! Natalie!" A camera flash went off right in my face, blinding me. Then another, and another. I scrambled to my knees, hair wild, looking every bit the deranged woman my ex-husband had painted me to be. "Stop it!" Lucas's voice cut through the chaos. It was not a command of anger, it was a shout of panic. "Stop! Do not hurt him!" The guards froze, but they did not let go. Lucas pushed past his own security detail, ignoring the PR woman who was frantically whispering in his ear to get back inside. He dropped to one knee, heedless of his suit, bringing himself to Eli's eye level. He was trembling just as hard as the boy. He reached out a hand, hovering it near Eli's face, as if afraid the boy would vanish if he made contact. "Elias?" Lucas whispered. The name sounded like a prayer he had stopped believing in. "I told you," Eli sobbed, tears streaming down his dirty cheeks. "I told you I did not die. I woke up under the bridge." Lucas looked up at me. His eyes were wide, red-rimmed, and filled with a chaotic mix of hope and suspicion. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. "Who are you, and where did you get this boy?" "I am his guardian," I panted, standing up and brushing the gravel from my knees. "I found him 3 years ago behind a bakery. He was freezing." 3 years ago, Lucas murmured. He looked back at Eli, searching his face for answers. "Sir," a sharp-looking woman in a blazer, his lawyer, I assumed, stepped in, putting a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "We need to move. Now. The press is eating this up. This could be a setup. We need to verify this privately." Lucas blinked, snapping back to the reality of the cameras surrounding us. He stood up, his face hardening into a mask of resolve. "Bring them inside," Lucas ordered. "Now." "Sir, we should call the police first," the lawyer hissed. "This woman could be—" "I said bring them inside," Lucas roared, a sound so powerful it silenced the lawyer instantly. "And get those cameras out of my face." I was ushered, dragged, really, through the back doors of the church, away from the prying eyes of the public. They separated us immediately. "No, he stays with me," I protested as a security officer steered Eli toward a different hallway. "He will be safe, ma'am," the officer said firmly, blocking my path. "Mr. Langford wants to see you first." I was shoved into a small, windowless room that smelled of floor wax. It was a Sunday school classroom, with cheerful drawings of Noah's Ark on the walls, creating a bizarre contrast to the interrogation that followed. For 20 minutes, I sat alone, my hands shaking in my lap. Then the door opened. It was not Lucas. It was the lawyer, accompanied by 2 men who looked like they were carved from granite. "My name is Sienna Blake," the woman said. She did not sit down. She stood over me, her eyes scanning me like a barcode reader. "I represent Mr. Langford. Let us cut to the chase. How much do you want?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The boy," she said, tapping a pen against her clipboard. "You found a child who resembles the deceased son of a billionaire. You waited for a public event. You staged a dramatic reveal. It is a bold play. So, what is the number? 50,000? 100,000? Tell us, and maybe we can avoid federal fraud charges." "I do not want your money," I said, my voice rising. "I did not know who he was until 10 minutes ago. I have been raising him for 3 years because nobody else would. I love him." Sienna laughed, a dry, cold sound. "You love him. You are homeless. Miss Pierce, we ran your face through the database, divorced, fired, evicted, disowned by your family. You are desperate. Desperate people do not act out of love. They act out of survival. I am not a criminal, I said, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Ask Eli. Ask him about the cookies. Ask him about the nights I held him when he had nightmares about the water. The door opened again. This time, Lucas entered. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last half hour. He had a glass of water in his hand, and it was shaking. Sienna, stop, Lucas said quietly. Lucas, she fits the profile of a grifter, Sienna argued. We cannot trust a word she says. Lucas looked at me. There was a raw, naked vulnerability in his eyes that disarmed me. He knows things, Lucas said softly. He told the social worker about the scar on my shoulder. He knows the name of the dog we had 5 years ago. He knows things only Elias would know. It could be coached, Sienna countered. She could have researched you. Nobody knew about the dog's nickname, Lucas said. He took a deep breath. But we have to be sure. The world thinks my son died in a boating accident 3 years ago. If this is him, it is a miracle. If it is a lie, it will destroy me. He turned to me. I want a DNA test, right now. We have a private lab on retainer. They can have results in 6 hours. Fine, I said immediately. Do it. And until the results are in, Lucas continued, his voice becoming firmer, more businesslike. Elias stays with us. My team has arranged for him to be transported to a secure medical facility downtown. He needs a full checkup. He looks malnourished. That word stung more than the accusations of fraud. I did my best, I whispered. I starved so he could eat. We will see, Lucas said. If he is my son, you will be compensated for your trouble. If you are lying, you will go to prison. I cannot leave him, I said, panic rising. He will be scared without me. He is with the best child psychologists money can buy. Sienna interjected. He does not need a woman living out of a car. He needs stability. Lucas nodded to the guards. Escort Miss Pierce out the back way. The front is a zoo. Wait, I cried as they grabbed my arms. You cannot just take him. I have guardianship papers. Not anymore, Sienna said coldly. We just filed an emergency injunction based on the endangerment of a minor. You are homeless. Miss Pierce, you have no standing. They marched me out the rear exit of the church, into the alleyway where the dumpsters were. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind me. I stood there in the drizzle, my palms bleeding, my heart ripped out of my chest. I could hear the sirens of the police cars arriving out front. I could hear the faint roar of the reporters shouting questions. I checked my phone. It was buzzing with notifications. A photo of me on the ground, hair wild, looking like a maniac while reaching for a terrified Eli, was already trending on social media. The headline read, Homeless woman attacks billionaire, claims kidnapped son. I was alone again, but this time, I was not just poor. I was the most hated woman in America, and the only person who knew the truth was locked away in a high-rise tower, waiting for a drop of blood to prove he belonged there. The waiting room was a study in aggressive sterility. It was all brushed steel, white leather, and glass that was so clean it looked like empty air. I sat there for 6 hours, watching the digital clock on the wall tick away the seconds of my life. My hands were still dirty from the pavement outside the church. My coat was still damp. I looked like a smudge of dirt on a pristine canvas. When the heavy oak doors finally opened, Lucas Langford walked in. He looked different than he had in the church courtyard. The practiced, media-ready armor was gone. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He did not sit down. He stood at the end of the long conference table, looking at me with a mixture of awe and devastation. It is him, he said. His voice was rough, like gravel. The markers are a 99.9% match. The boy is Elias. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. I told you. You did, Lucas said. He walked over to the window. staring out at the city skyline. 3 years ago, we were on the yacht. It was his 7th birthday. There was a storm, a chaotic squall that came out of nowhere. The deck was slippery. 1 minute he was there, and the next, he was gone. He paused, and I saw his shoulders shake once. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days. He continued. My wife, my ex-wife, Rowan, she was hysterical. She insisted he had gone over the rail. She said she saw him fall. She pushed for the memorial service. She wanted the closure. I think part of me wanted to believe he was gone because the alternative, that he was out there alone in the dark, was too much to bear. So I signed the death certificate. I stopped looking. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, despite everything. He does not remember falling. He just remembers waking up under a bridge. I know. Lucas turned back to me. We do not know how he got from the water to the city. Someone must have pulled him out. Or maybe he drifted. We will investigate that. But the point is, he is alive, and he is alive because of you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the polished table toward me. I am a man who pays his debts. Miss Pierce, he said, his voice shifting back into a businesslike cadence. It was a defense mechanism. I realized he was retreating into the only language he spoke fluently. Transaction. Inside is a check for $200,000. I can also wire an additional amount to an account of your choosing. It is enough to get you back on your feet, buy a house, start over. I looked at the envelope. It sat there like an insult. $200,000. It was more money than I had ever seen. It could solve every problem I had. It could buy me a new car, a wardrobe, an apartment where the landlord did not chew toothpicks. But then I thought about Eli. I thought about the nights I held him while he shook with fever. I thought about the way he trusted me when the rest of the world looked at him like trash. Taking this money felt like selling that trust. It felt like admitting that Eli was just a job I had completed. I stood up. Keep it. Lucas blinked, genuinely confused. Excuse me? I did not take care of him for a reward, I said, my voice shaking with quiet anger. I took care of him because he was a child who needed a mother, and I was the only one who stepped up. You think you can just write a check and erase the last 3 years? You think you can buy my silence and my role in his life? It is not about silence, Lucas said, looking offended. It is gratitude. It is a dismissal, I corrected him. You want to pay the homeless woman to go away so you can play happy family. Well, I do not want your money. I want to say goodbye to Eli, and then I am going to leave. But I will not take a dime from you. I turned to the door. Wait, a sharp voice cut in. Sienna Blake, the lawyer with the ice-water veins, stepped out from the corner of the room. I had not even noticed her standing there. She walked over to Lucas and whispered something low and urgent. She is a liability. Lucas, I heard her say, if she walks out of here and goes back to living in a car, the press will crucify us. Billionaire reunites with son, leaves Savior on the street. It destroys the narrative. We need to control this. Lucas looked at her, then at me. He seemed to struggle with the decision, but the businessman won out. Miss Pierce, Lucas said, stepping forward. Sienna is right. We cannot just let you leave. The media interest is already out of control. There are vans parked outside right now. That is not my problem, I said. It is if you care about Elias, Lucas said. That stopped me. He is fragile right now. He keeps asking for you. The psychologists say ripping him away from his primary attachment figure so abruptly could cause severe regression. He needs a transition. My heart squeezed. So what are you suggesting? Come work for us, Lucas said. The Langford Hope Foundation. We have a position opening in the Community Outreach Division. It fits your recent experiences, and as part of the employment package, we will provide housing. Housing? There is a guest house on the estate at Langford Point, he said. It is private, fully furnished. You would be close to Elias during his recovery. You can see him every day. You get a salary, a home, And Elias gets to keep the one person he trusts while he gets to know me again. I looked at him, searching for the catch. It was a golden cage. I knew that. They wanted to keep me close so they could watch me, so they could make sure I did not sell my story to the tabloids. But then I imagined driving away, leaving Eli alone in a tower with strangers who spoke in contracts and non-disclosure agreements. I will take it, I said. For Eli. 2 hours later, my battered sedan was following a black SUV through the wrought iron gates of Langford Point. The estate was obscenely beautiful. It sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a sprawling modern mansion of glass and stone that looked like it belonged in a movie about futuristic utopias. My car, with its rusted bumper and squealing fan belt, looked like a stain on the driveway. The guest house was separate from the main mansion, nestled in a grove of eucalyptus trees. It was larger than the house I had shared with Travis. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen with marble countertops, and a bed that looked like a cloud. I stood in the middle of the living room, holding my duffel bag. It was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the ocean crashing against the rocks far below. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. Tired eyes, cheap clothes, worn-out shoes. I was standing in a palace, but I felt like an intruder. I was a stray cat that had been allowed indoors, not because I was wanted, but because I was useful. "You are safe," I whispered to my reflection. "Eli is safe." But I did not feel safe. I felt watched. Miles away, in the town of Riversend, the evening news was flickering on the television screen in my parents' living room. Gerald sat in his armchair, a cup of tea untouched on the coaster. Linda was standing by the fireplace, her hand covering her mouth. On the screen, a reporter was standing outside the New Haven Chapel. The chyron read, "The Billionaire's Lost Son. Miracle in Riversend." Then, the footage rolled. It showed the chaos in the courtyard. It showed me, their daughter, disheveled and desperate, being shoved by security. Then it cut to a clip of Lucas Langford's official statement released an hour ago, confirming the identity of his son and thanking a local citizen for her care. "It is her," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. "It is really her." Gerald stared at the screen, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. He did not see a daughter who had done a good deed. He did not see a woman who had sacrificed everything for a child. He saw an opportunity. "She knew," Gerald said, his voice low and cynical. "That is why she brought that boy to our house. She knew who he was all along." "You think so?" Linda asked. "Natalie is not smart enough to make it on her own," Gerald said, picking up his tea. "But she is cunning. She found a golden ticket. She latched onto that boy because she knew he was her way out of poverty." He watched the screen as an image of the Langford estate flashed up, the reporter speculating that the mystery woman had been taken there. "She did not come to us for help." "Linda," Gerald said, a cold smile touching his lips. "She came to rub it in. She traded a lawyer for a billionaire. She has found a bigger host to parasitize." "So she is not homeless?" Linda asked, hope warring with judgment. "No," Gerald said. "She is set for life, and we are her parents. We raised her. If she has found her way into that family, then we have a foot in the door, too." He took a sip of his tea, the steam rising around his face. "Maybe we were too harsh. Maybe it is time we reached out to our daughter. After all, family supports family." I did not know it then, standing in the silence of the guest house, but the sharks were already circling, and the most dangerous ones were the ones who shared my last name. Working at the Langford Hope Foundation was like learning to breathe underwater. The air was different here, thinner, colder, and smelling faintly of expensive espresso and anxiety. My office was a glass box on the 42nd floor of the Langford Tower, offering a panoramic view of the city that had chewed me up and spit me out only weeks ago. Now, I was looking down on it, organizing charity galas and drafting press releases about sustainable community growth. But I never felt safe. I felt like a specimen in a jar. Sienna Blake, Lucas's shark-like attorney, made sure of that. She did not walk. She patrolled. Every time I looked up from my laptop, I would catch her reflection in the glass, watching me. She was waiting for me to slip, to steal a silver spoon, or to say the wrong thing to a donor. She wanted me gone, and we both knew it. We are preparing the prospectus for the Halo Grid IPO, Sienna told me one Tuesday morning, dropping a stack of files on my desk. I need you to summarize the community impact statement. Do not embarrass us with sentimental drivel. Keep it corporate. I nodded, pulling the heavy binder toward me. Halo Grid was the crown jewel of Langford Dynamics, a renewable energy subsidiary that was about to go public. It was the deal that was supposed to make Lucas the richest man in the hemisphere. I flipped through the dense legal jargon, my eyes glazing over until I hit the page listing the external legal counsel and compliance auditors. My heart stopped. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. Legal representation, Cole and Marston, LLP. I stared at the name. Cole, Travis. My ex-husband's firm was not just a local practice. They had been acquired by a larger entity recently, but seeing his name attached to Lucas's company made the room spin. It felt like a violation of the laws of physics. My past and my present were not supposed to touch. 2 days later, the inevitable collision happened. We were in the main boardroom for a strategy meeting regarding the public offering. Lucas sat at the head of the table, looking tired but focused. Beside him sat Camden Royce, the chief financial officer. Camden was a man who looked like he had been made out of dried parchment, thin, raspy-voiced, with eyes that blinked too slowly. Our legal team has cleared the regulatory hurdles, Camden rasped, tapping a gold pen on the table. We are ready to proceed with the filing. The double doors opened, and a team of lawyers walked in. I smelled him before I saw him, sandalwood and crisp starch, the scent of my marriage, the scent of the man who had thrown me away. Travis walked in second. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, carrying a leather briefcase I had bought him for his 30th birthday. He looked successful. He looked happy. He scanned the room, nodding at Camden, smiling at Lucas. Then his eyes swept over the lower-level staff seated against the wall. He saw me. For a second, the mask slipped. His confident stride faltered. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly, a flash of genuine panic crossing his face. It was not just surprise. It was fear. But Travis was a master of adaptation. In the blink of an eye, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sneering amusement. He took his seat opposite me. Throughout the meeting, he did not look at me once. He spoke about risk mitigation and asset protection, with the smooth baritone voice that had once convinced me he was a good man. I sat there, gripping my pen so hard I thought it would snap. I was shaking. When the meeting adjourned, I tried to bolt for the door, but the crowd was slow. I found myself trapped in the glass corridor that connected the conference wing to the elevators. Well, a voice said behind me, I have to admit, Natalie, I underestimated you. I turned around. Travis was leaning against the glass wall, hands in his pockets. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and begrudging respect. What are you doing here, Travis? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. I am a partner at Cole and Marston, he said, stepping closer. We handle the dirty work for the big boys. But you? I heard the rumors, but I did not believe them. From sleeping in a car to living in the Billionaire's guest house, that is quite the climb. Who are you sleeping with? The father or the security guard? I am working, I said, stepping back. I am earning my keep, unlike you, who earns a living destroying people. I win cases. Natalie, he said, his smile tight. Just like I won ours. By the way, how is the little street rat? I am surprised Lucas has not kicked him back to the gutter yet. Or is the DNA test fake too? Elias is his son, I hissed, and you do not get to speak about him. Elias. Travis rolled the name around his mouth like a bad taste. Right. The miracle resurrection. You know, it is interesting. I was reviewing the trust structure for the Langford family yesterday. Standard due diligence. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Did you know there is a fascinating clause in the family trust? The Royce contingency, they call it. If the direct heir, that would be your little Elias, is declared deceased or missing for more than 5 years, the voting rights for the entire block of Langford Dynamics shares transfer permanently to a board committee. So, I asked, confused by his sudden shift to legalese. So, Travis whispered, his eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. That committee is chaired by Camden Royce. If that boy had stayed missing for just 2 more years, Camden would have controlled a $100 billion empire, and Lucas would have been a figurehead. It is a shame you found him. You really ruined a beautiful piece of corporate architecture. He patted my shoulder, a condescending, heavy touch, and walked away, whistling. I stood there, cold all over. Why would he tell me that? It sounded like a taunt, but it also sounded like a slip. Travis loved showing off how much he knew. He had just confirmed that Eli's disappearance had a direct, massive financial benefit for Camden Royce. The next day, the ground shifted under my feet again. I arrived at my desk to find my access to the shared drive was denied. A moment later, an email popped up from Sienna Blake. Subject: Personnel Review. I walked into her office. She did not offer me a seat. She slid a piece of paper across her desk. It was a printout of an email sent to the general HR inbox from an anonymous address. To whom it may concern. It has come to my attention that Natalie Pierce, currently employed in your outreach division, has a documented history of severe emotional instability. Attached are court transcripts from her recent divorce proceedings in Northbridge, where she was characterized as having an unhealthy, obsessive fixation on a minor and displaying paranoid delusions regarding her spouse. Is this the kind of person Langford Dynamics trusts with sensitive family matters? Is this true? Sienna asked, her voice like a whip. Did a judge say these things? My ex-husband's lawyer said those things. I defended myself, feeling the walls closing in. They were lies to win a divorce case. That email. It is from him, Travis Cole. He was here yesterday. I do not care who sent it, Sienna said. I care that it exists. I care that if this leaks to the press, we look like we hired a mental patient to babysit the heir. Until further notice, you are under internal monitoring. No access to sensitive files, no speaking to the press, and for God's sake, keep a low profile. I walked out, burning with humiliation. Travis was gaslighting me again, but this time on a corporate scale. He was trying to discredit me, to push me out. Why? If he was just a lawyer doing a job, why go to the trouble of destroying his ex-wife who was already out of his life? Unless I was close to something I was not supposed to see. That evening, the air at Langford Point was thick with fog. The ocean was a gray churn below the cliffs. I took Eli for a walk along the private marina path to clear my head. The estate had its own dock, where Lucas kept a small fleet of recreational boats. Eli was quiet. He had been having nightmares again. The psychologist said it was part of the integration process, but I knew it was more. He was remembering. We walked past a large boathouse where a sleek white yacht was dry docked for repairs. It was covered in a heavy blue tarp that flapped in the wind. Eli stopped. He dropped the pine cone he had been playing with. He stared at the covered boat, his breathing hitching. Eli? I asked, kneeling down. What is wrong? The smell, he whispered. I sniffed the air. The wind was carrying the scent of the ocean, but also a faint whiff of diesel and something else. Someone had walked by recently wearing cologne. Strong, musky cologne. Sandalwood. It smells like the man, Eli said, his voice trembling. Which man? Honey? Lucas? No. Eli shook his head violently. The man who yelled at Mommy. I froze. You mean Rowan? Your mom? Yes, Eli said. He was staring at the tarp as if he could see through it into the past. It was night, on the big boat. It was my birthday. Mommy was crying. She was arguing with a man. He had a black spot on his neck. My blood ran cold. Travis had a mole on the side of his neck, just below his ear, a distinct, dark mark. What did the man look like? Eli? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He was tall. He wore a suit. He smelled like that. Eli pointed to the air where the cologne scent lingered. Perhaps a worker. Or perhaps Travis had been here earlier for a meeting I did not know about. He told Mommy to stop being stupid. He said, "The papers are ready," and then... Eli squeezed his eyes shut. Then another man came, the man with the scratchy voice, like a frog. Camden Royce, the man with the raspy voice. What did they do, Eli? The scratchy man gave me a juice box, Eli whispered. He said we were going on a special trip. He put me in a car, not a boat, a car. I felt sleepy, and then I woke up under the bridge. I stood up, pulling Eli into my arms. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was not an accident. Eli had not fallen overboard. He had been kidnapped. The pieces slammed together in my mind with terrifying clarity. The Royce clause. If Eli disappeared, Camden took control. Travis was the lawyer who handled the paperwork. Rowan, Eli's mother, had insisted he was dead. Was she part of it? Or was she coerced? Travis had been paranoid about money during our marriage because he was hiding a payoff. He had started working late nights 3 years ago, right when Eli disappeared. He had reacted with such visceral hatred toward Eli, not because he hated children, but because he was terrified. He had recognized the boy, or at least, he had feared what the boy represented. When I brought Eli home that night 3 years ago, I had unknowingly brought the evidence of a massive crime into the house of one of the perpetrators. I looked up at the main house, where the lights were blazing. Lucas was up there, probably working, completely unaware that his trusted CFO and his new legal counsel were the ones who had stolen his son. I looked at the text message notification on my phone. It was from an unknown number. "Be careful. Natalie, accidents happen to curious people. Just ask the boy." I deleted the message. I did not scream. I did not run to Lucas. Not yet. I had no proof. Only the memories of a traumatized child and the intuition of a woman who had been lied to for years. I took Eli's hand. "Let us go inside. Baby, it is getting cold." "Did I say something wrong?" Eli asked, looking up at me with worry. "No," I said, kissing his forehead. "You were very brave. You remembered the most important thing." I walked back to the guest house, my fear hardening into something cold and sharp. Travis thought he had broken me. He thought I was just a discarded wife, a nuisance to be swatted away with an email and a threat. He was wrong. I was not just Natalie the victim anymore. I was the only person who saw the whole board, and I was going to burn his entire game to the ground. But first, I needed proof. I needed to dig into the finances, into the logs, into the dark corners where they thought no one was looking. I opened my laptop. I did not log into the work server. Instead, I opened a private browser and typed in a search query. Langford Dynamics Board of Directors 2020 changes. The game was on. I needed an ally who understood the shark tank I was swimming in, but who was not trying to eat me. That list was incredibly short. In fact, it contained exactly one name, Marianne Langford. Lucas's older sister was the family pariah, a title she wore like a badge of honor. She had been ousted from the board of directors 4 years ago for being obstructionist, which I quickly learned was corporate code for asking too many questions about where the money was going. Now, she worked as a forensic accountant, auditing companies that were too messy for the big firms to touch. I met her at her brownstone in the city, a place filled with mid-century furniture and stacks of financial ledgers that served as makeshift end tables. She was a sharp-featured woman with a bob cut that looked like it could slice paper. "So," she said, pouring me a cup of black coffee that smelled like jet fuel, "you are the stray who brought my nephew back from the dead, and now you think my brother's CFO is a crook? Do I have that right?" "I do not just think it," I said, pulling a USB drive from my pocket, a copy of the files I had downloaded before my access was revoked. "I know something is wrong. Travis Cole, my ex-husband, mentioned the Royce contingency. He practically bragged about it." Marianne's eyes narrowed behind her thick-rimmed glasses. She snatched the drive from my hand and plugged it into her laptop. "The Royce contingency," she muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I always suspected Camden buried a kill switch in the trust bylaws. I just could never prove it because I did not have the access codes for the private family ledger. But if you have the timestamps from the internal server—" She fell silent as the spreadsheets populated the screen. We spent the next 2 hours combing through the digital wreckage of the Langford fortune. It was not a chaotic mess. It was a surgical dismantling. "Look at this," Marianne said, pointing to a column of dates. "Here is the date Elias was declared legally dead, November 14th, 3 years ago. Look what happens on November 16th. I leaned in. A transfer of voting rights. 40% of the voting stock held in the heirs' trust was moved to a temporary stewardship fund, Marianne explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. Controlled by a committee of 3, Camden Royce, the head of legal, and an external advisor. She clicked on the external advisor's profile. It was a shell company, but the registered agent address was familiar. 104 State Street, I read aloud. That is the old address of Cole and Marston before they moved to the high-rise. Your husband's firm, Marianne said grimly. They did not just benefit from the fees. They were the architects. They needed Elias gone. As long as Lucas had an heir, the trust was locked. But a dead heir? That unlocks the vault. But Lucas signed the death certificate, I said, feeling sick. He blames himself. Lucas was a wreck, Marianne said, taking a drag from a cigarette she had just lit. He was medicated, grieving, and surrounded by vultures telling him it was time to move on. They used his grief as a weapon. And Rowan. God, that woman. Rowan? I asked. Eli's mother? Marianne stood up and walked to a safe hidden behind a painting of a storm. She spun the dial and pulled out a small, silver hard drive. Rowan had a breakdown right after the accident, Marianne said. Before she was sent to the clinic in Switzerland, I went to the house to help pack her things. I found her laptop. She had been recording voice memos, rambling, mostly, paranoia, but I copied the drive before her nurse, hired by Camden, by the way, confiscated the computer. I have never listened to all of it. It was too painful. But maybe we should... She connected the drive. We scrolled through dozens of files labeled with dates. Marianne clicked on one dated 2 days before the yacht trip. The room filled with the sound of a woman crying. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. I cannot do it anymore. Rowan's voice cracked through the speakers. He is too much. He is always watching me. The boy. He is the only thing Lucas cares about. I am just the incubator who expired. Then, a second voice spoke. It was a male voice. Calm, soothing, deadly. You are looking at it the wrong way. Rowan, the boy is the obstacle, but obstacles can be removed. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the edge of the desk. I knew that voice. I had heard it whisper, I love you in the dark. I had heard it lie to a judge. That is Travis, I whispered. That is my husband. The recording continued. Removed? Rowan sounded terrified but intrigued. Lucas would kill me. Lucas will not know, Travis's voice purred. If he disappears legally, everything is smooth. No body, no crime, just a tragic accident. You will be the grieving mother, the settlement you will get from the insurance and the trust dissolution. It is enough to live in Paris forever. You want Paris, do not you? But hurt him? No pain, Travis promised. Just gone, a fresh start for everyone. Marianne clicked stop. The silence in the room was deafening. He sold a child, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like it could burn the house down. He talked about Eli like he was a piece of furniture to be moved so he could get a commission. And so Camden could take the company, Marianne added, her face pale. They played Rowan's jealousy and greed, and Travis? He was the handler. We had the motive, we had the method. Now we needed to see if the victim remembered the crime. I went back to the guest house that evening, my mind racing. Eli was sitting on the rug, drawing a picture of a boat. It was a detailed sketch for a 10-year-old. He had drawn a man standing on the deck. "Hey, buddy," I said, sitting down beside him. "That is a good drawing." "It is the day I left," Eli said matter-of-factly. "Can you tell me about the man?" I asked gently. "Not Dad, the other man." Eli tapped the paper with his crayon. "The lawyer friend, Mommy's friend. He came to the boat. He told me Dad had a surprise for me on the shore. He said we had to take a secret ride." "Did he drive the car?" "No," Eli said. "He put me in the back seat. He gave me a juice box. It tasted funny, like medicine. I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was under the bridge, and my head hurt." It was the final piece. Drugged and dumped. They probably intended for him to die of exposure or get picked up by the foster system under a John Doe status forever. They did not count on him surviving, and they certainly did not count on me. "We have to tell Lucas," I told Marianne over the phone an hour later. "He might not believe us," she warned. "Camden has his ear. He has been insulating Lucas for years." "He will believe this," I said. "He has to." We staged the intervention in the library of the main house. It was midnight. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Lucas was sitting by the fire, reviewing a speech for the upcoming shareholders' meeting. When Marianne and I walked in, he looked up, annoyed. "I told the staff I did not want to be disturbed," he said. "This is not a social call, Lucas," Marianne said, locking the heavy wooden doors behind us. "And you are going to want to pour yourself a drink for this." "What is going on?" Lucas stood up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He looked at me. "Natalie, is Elias okay?" "Elias is asleep," I said. "We are here to talk about why he was gone in the first place." I placed the laptop on his mahogany desk. I did not give a preamble. I just pressed play. Lucas stood frozen as the voices filled the cavernous room. When he heard Rowan's voice, he flinched, but when he heard Travis suggesting the removal of his son, Lucas's face underwent a terrifying transformation. The grief he had carried for 3 years evaporated, replaced by a cold, predatory fury. He listened to the end. When the recording stopped, he did not scream. He picked up his crystal tumbler of scotch and threw it into the fireplace. The glass shattered, the alcohol causing the flames to flare up violently. "They took him," Lucas whispered. It was a sound of pure agony. "My wife, my CFO, your husband. They stole my son and left him to die in a gutter so they could adjust a spreadsheet." He sank into his chair, putting his head in his hands. "I signed the papers. I let them do it. I was so busy building the company. I did not see the snakes in my own bed." "You could not have known," I said, stepping forward. "They gaslit you, Lucas, just like they gaslit me. They are professionals at destroying reality." "I will kill them," Lucas said, looking up. His eyes were dead calm. "I will kill them with my bare hands." "No," Marianne said sharply. "If you do that, you go to jail, and Camden wins. He has the board. He has the voting rights. If you are arrested, he takes full control of Langford Dynamics instantly." "So what do I do?" Lucas demanded. "Let them get away with it?" "No," I said. "We destroy them, but we do it their way, publicly, irreversibly." I laid out the plan we had formed in the car. "The shareholders' meeting is in 3 days," I said. "Camden and Travis are planning to present the reorganization plan, the final step to cementing their control. They think you are a broken, grieving father who is just a figurehead. They think I am a discredited nuisance who is about to be fired, and they think Eli is a traumatized child who remembers nothing." "We let them believe it," Marianne said. "We let them walk onto that stage. We let them make their speeches about integrity and the future." "And then," I said, a fierce smile touching my lips, "we introduced the guest of honor." Lucas looked at me, then at his sister. He took a deep breath, the trembling in his hands stopping. He was no longer the victim. He was the CEO again. "What do I need to do?" he asked. Act like everything is normal, I said. Let Travis think he has won. Let Camden think he owns you. Sign the preliminary papers if you have to. Make them feel safe. And Elias? Lucas asked, his voice softening. I will guard him with my life, I promised. Nobody gets near him until that meeting. For the next 3 days, Langford Point was a fortress of secrets. We moved in silence. I recorded every interaction with Sienna, every sneer from Travis when he came to the house to drop off documents. I gathered the evidence of their arrogance. I knew we were walking into a trap. If Camden realized we knew, they would not hesitate to finish the job they started 3 years ago. But looking at Eli, who was finally sleeping through the night because he knew his dad was just down the hall, I knew I would burn the whole world down to keep him safe. The pieces were set, the players were in position, and the men who thought they were kings were about to find out that a homeless woman and a little boy were the ones holding the aces. The air in the hotel room felt pressurized, like the cabin of a plane right before it loses altitude. I had been sent to a luxury hotel in downtown Riversend, supposedly to oversee the final logistics for the Langford Hope Foundation's gala, which was conveniently scheduled to coincide with the shareholders' meeting. It was a distraction, I knew that, but I had played along to keep up appearances. I was zipping up my suitcase, preparing to head back to the estate, when the pounding on the door started. It was not the polite tap of housekeeping, it was the heavy, authoritative thud of law enforcement. I opened the door to find 3 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective holding a warrant. Natalie Pierce? The detective asked. He looked bored, like he had already written the report. We received an anonymous tip regarding the distribution of narcotics from this room. We need to search the premises. This is ridiculous, I said, stepping back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I am here for a charity event. You can search whatever you want. I was confident. I was innocent. I had underestimated how dirty Travis was willing to play. It took them less than 2 minutes. The officer opened the front pocket of my carry-on bag, a pocket I had not touched in days, and pulled out a clear plastic bag filled with white powder and a small digital scale. Looks like we found the stash, the officer said. I stared at the bag, the room spinning. That is not mine. I have never seen that before. Save it for the station, the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. Natalie Pierce, you are under arrest for possession with intent to distribute. As they marched me through the lobby, I saw the flashbulbs. The press had been tipped off. They were waiting. I lowered my head, but I knew the image would be everywhere within minutes. Billionaire's angel caught in drug bust. It was the perfect narrative to discredit me. Who would believe a woman accused of drug dealing when she claimed a CFO kidnapped a child? I was placed in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair. I sat on the metal bench, refusing to cry. I knew this was the cleanup Travis had threatened. I want my lawyer, I told the detective when he came in to interrogate me. And I want you to pull the security footage from the hotel hallway between 4 and 6 this afternoon. I was at the venue. Someone entered my room. The cameras on your floor were malfunctioning, the detective said, leaning back in his chair. Convenient. My fingerprints are not on that bag, I insisted. We will see, he said. But right now, the press is eating you alive. Your boss, Mr. Langford? His stock dropped 2 points since your mugshot hit Twitter. Meanwhile, miles away at Langford Point, the real war was happening. Lucas was pacing his office, the news playing on the wall-mounted screen. Sienna Blake was standing by the desk, holding a tablet. You have to cut her loose, Lucas, Sienna said, her voice urgent. This is a PR nightmare. We are 48 hours away from the most important vote in company history. If you are linked to a drug dealer, Camden will use the morality clause to strip you of the chairmanship before the meeting even starts. She was framed, Lucas said, running a hand through his hair. It is too neat, too timed. It does not matter if she was framed, Sienna argued. Perception is reality. You need to issue a statement distancing the foundation from her, Say she was a probationary employee and her actions do not reflect our values. Lucas looked at the statement Sienna had drafted. It was a betrayal in 3 paragraphs. I cannot do that, Lucas said. She saved Elias. She is dragging you down, Sienna snapped. Think about the company. Think about your legacy. Marianne, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up. She walked over to her brother and placed a hand on his arm. You listened to the smart people 3 years ago. Lucas, she said softly, you listened to the lawyers and the PR experts who told you to close the book on your son. You ignored your gut, and it cost you 3 years of his life. Are you going to do it again? Lucas looked at Marianne, then at the statement. He crumpled the paper in his fist. No, Lucas said. I am not signing this. Then you are going to lose everything, Sienna warned. In the hallway, pressed against the doorframe, Eli was listening. He had heard the words drug dealer and prison. He had heard Sienna trying to throw me away. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He knew what happened when adults decided someone was a problem. They made them disappear. He had been disappeared once. He was not going to let it happen to me. Eli ran to his room. He dug into his backpack and pulled out the small silver USB drive. He had swiped it a week ago when Travis had visited the estate and foolishly left his briefcase open while taunting Eli about being a lucky little street rat, Travis had bragged. This drive holds the biggest case of my life, kid. You wouldn't understand. Eli understood enough. He understood that Travis was the bad man. He ran down the back stairs to the kitchen. He found Ben, the head of the household staff, a man who had once given Eli an extra slice of cake and told him he was glad he was home. Mr. Ben, Eli panted, tugging on the man's apron. I need to go. Now. Go where, Master Elias? Ben asked, wiping his hands. To the police, Eli said, his eyes blazing. They have Natalie. I have the proof. Please, you have to drive me. Ben looked at the boy, then at the security monitors showing the chaos at the front gate. He saw the desperation in the child's face. The same child who had been lost for 3 years. Get in the delivery van, Ben said quietly. I will take the service road. 40 minutes later, the detective in my interrogation room looked up as the door banged open. He was about to yell, but he stopped when he saw a small boy in a Langford Academy hoodie standing there, flanked by a very determined-looking chauffeur. I am Elias Langford, Eli announced, his voice trembling but loud. And you have my mom. Kid, you cannot be back here, the detective started. She did not do the drugs, Eli said, walking up to the table and slamming the USB drive down. He did, the man with the mole on his neck. He talks about it on this. The detective looked at the drive, then at me. I was staring at Eli in shock. Check it, I whispered. Please. The detective sighed and plugged the drive into his laptop. He clicked on the most recent file. It was a Zoom recording. The video showed Travis sitting in his office, talking to Camden Royce. The Pierce problem is escalating, Travis said on the screen. She is digging into the trust files. Handle it, Camden's raspy voice replied. Discredit her. I do not care how. I have a contact at the hotel, Travis said, leaning back with a smirk. A little bag of powder in her luggage. A tip to the cops. She will be so busy fighting a felony charge she won't make it to the meeting. And even if she does, who listens to a junkie? Make sure it sticks, Camden said. We cannot afford her talking about the boat incident. If they find out we drugged the kid. The kid remembers nothing. Travis laughed. I told you I drugged him myself. He was out cold before we even got him off the yacht. It is a clean win. Camden. The room went silent. The detective's face had lost all its boredom. He looked sick. That is a conspiracy to commit a felony, the detective muttered. An admission of kidnapping. He stood up and uncuffed me. Ms. Pierce, I am so sorry. You are free to go. I need to make some calls to the district attorney. We are going to need warrants. I did not wait for the paperwork. I grabbed Eli and hugged him so hard I lifted him off the ground. "You saved me," I cried into his neck. "You brave, brilliant boy." "We have to go," Eli said, pulling back. "Dad needs us. The meeting is starting." I looked at the clock. The shareholders' meeting began in 20 minutes at the Grand Historic Hotel across town. "Ben," I said to the driver, "how fast can that van go?" "Fast enough," Ben grinned. We tore through the city streets. I changed out of my prison sweat-stained clothes in the back of the van. Pulling on a spare blazer I had left in the car days ago, I opened my laptop and connected it to my phone's hotspot, uploading the audio files from the USB to the cloud, ensuring Travis could never delete them. We screeched to a halt in front of the hotel. The valet looked horrified as a delivery van curbed illegally. "Stay here with Ben," I told Eli. "I need to finish this." "No," Eli said, grabbing my hand. "I am coming. They need to see me." I looked at him. He was right. He was the proof. "Okay," I said. "Run." We sprinted through the gilded revolving doors. The lobby was empty. Everyone was in the ballroom. I could hear the muffled sound of applause coming from the double doors at the end of the hall. My heels clicked sharply on the marble floor. I clutched the laptop like a shield. Eli ran beside me, his sneakers squeaking. We burst through the ballroom doors just as Camden Royce was standing at the podium. He was bathed in a spotlight, looking triumphant. "And so," Camden was saying into the microphone, his voice rasping through the speakers, "it is with a heavy heart, but a clear vision for the future that we move to restructure the leadership of Langford Dynamics, ensuring stability in the wake of our chairman's personal struggles." The heavy doors slammed open, echoing like a gunshot. 500 heads turned. I stood there, breathless, hair slightly wild, holding the hand of the boy who was supposed to be dead. "I object," I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the silent room. "And I think the air does too." Camden froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. Travis, sitting in the front row, dropped his pen. I marched down the center aisle, Eli by my side, heading straight for the stage where Lucas was sitting, looking like a man awaiting execution. When he saw us, he stood up, a look of pure, unadulterated hope breaking across his face. "Start the laptop," I whispered to the tech guy at the soundboard as I passed him. "I have a presentation to make." Camden was still gripping the podium, his knuckles white. "Security," he croaked. "Remove this woman." "Touch her," Lucas roared, stepping forward, his voice thundering without the microphone. "And you are fired." I stepped onto the stage. I looked at my parents, who were sitting in the back row, their mouths hanging open. I looked at Travis, who was looking for an exit, and then I looked at Camden. "You wanted to talk about stability," I said into the microphone. "Let us talk about the price of it." I hit the spacebar. The game was over. The ballroom of the Grand Historic Hotel was a sea of expensive cologne and hushed anxiety. 500 shareholders, board members, and journalists sat in velvet chairs, their eyes fixed on the stage. The air was cold, conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees, but Camden Royce was sweating. I could see the sheen of perspiration on his forehead as he stood at the podium, gripping the edges of the wood as if it were a life raft. "The future of Langford Dynamics," Camden rasped into the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers, "relies on stability, on decisive leadership. While we honor Lucas's past contributions, the board feels it is time to insulate the company from personal volatility." He gestured to the table where a stack of leather-bound documents waited. These were the papers that would transfer the voting rights of the family trust to his committee. He picked up a gold pen. "I am signing this today," Camden continued, "to protect the legacy of Elias Langford. May he rest in peace." "I do not think he is resting," a voice cut through the room. It was Lucas. He stood up from his seat in the front row. He did not look like the broken man Camden had described in the press briefings. He looked like a king reclaiming his throne. "In fact," Lucas said, turning to face the crowd, "my son is quite awake, and so is the woman who saved him." Lucas extended a hand toward the side of the stage. I stepped into the light. The murmur that swept through the room was like a physical wave. I saw Travis Cole in the third row. His face went slack. He half rose from his seat, his eyes darting to the side exits. But he saw the federal agents standing by the doors, arms crossed. "This woman is a criminal," Camden shouted, his composure shattering. "She was arrested for drug possession an hour ago. Security!" "I was released," I said, my voice steady as I took the microphone Lucas handed me. I plugged my laptop into the podium's HDMI cable. The massive screen behind us flickered to life. Because the police found it interesting that the man accusing me of being a junkie is the same man who discussed planting the drugs on a recorded line. "Turn it off!" Camden screamed, lunging for the laptop. Lucas stepped in between us, shoving Camden back into his seat with a force that knocked the wind out of him. "Listen," I commanded the room. I pressed play. The audio from the Zoom call boomed through the ballroom. It was crystal clear. Every shareholder, every reporter, every waiter heard Travis's voice dripping with arrogance. "The kid remembers nothing. I told you. I drugged him myself. It is a clean win. Camden." They heard Camden's raspy reply. "Make sure it sticks. We cannot afford her talking about the boat incident." And then, the line that sealed their fate, spoken by Camden regarding my ex-husband. "Your ex-wife is a nobody. She is too stupid to understand high finance. She is just a breeding mare who lost her stable." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. I looked at the crowd. "My name is Natalie Pierce. For 3 years, I raised the boy these men kidnapped. They stole a child to trigger a payout clause. They let a father believe his son was dead so they could steal a company. And when I got close to the truth, they tried to send me to prison." Marianne stepped up next to me, projecting a complex flow chart onto the screen. "Here is the money trail," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Transfers from the trust to shell companies controlled by Mr. Royce and Mr. Cole, dated 3 days after the accident. It is not mismanagement. It is theft." The spell broke. The room erupted. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights. "This is a fabrication," Travis yelled, standing up. "It is deep fake audio. I represent this company." "Not anymore," Lucas said. He nodded to the back of the room. The doors opened, and a team of FBI agents marched down the aisle. They did not stop for pleasantries. They walked straight to the stage. "Camden Royce," the lead agent said, snapping handcuffs onto the CFO's wrists. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, and securities fraud." Camden looked at Lucas, his eyes pleading. "Lucas, wait. We can talk about this. The stock price." "The stock will recover," Lucas said coldly. "You won't." I watched as they moved to Travis, my ex-husband, the man who had told me I was worthless, who had thrown me out of my home, who had tried to erase my existence. He looked at me as the cuffs clicked tight. "Natalie," he stammered, his face pale. "Natalie, tell them. I was just following orders. I can help you. I can testify against Camden. Please." I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at him. "You chose your side, Travis," I said softly. "You chose the money. You thought I was weak because I cared about a child more than a bank account, but you forgot one thing." "What?" he whispered. "Mothers do not lose," I said. "We just fight longer." They dragged him away. As he passed the cameras, he tried to hide his face, but the world saw him. The golden husband was just tarnished brass. The fallout was nuclear. In the small living room on Elm Street in Riversend, Gerald and Linda Pierce sat in silence. The television was blaring the breaking news. They watched the footage of me on stage. They heard the recording of Camden calling me stupid and a nobody. They heard the man they had admired, the respectable Travis, admitting to drugging a child. Linda put a hand to her mouth. He did that? To a little boy?" "We defended him," Gerald whispered, sinking into his armchair. "We threw our own daughter out into the rain for a kidnapper." "We have to call her," Linda said, reaching for the phone. "We have to apologize. She is famous now. Gerald, look at her. She is with the Langfords." "She won't answer," Gerald said, staring at the floor. "Why would she?" They were right. I did not answer. 6 months later, the dust had settled. The trial was the biggest event of the year. Travis and Camden were sentenced to 25 years each in federal prison. Their assets were seized. The financial ripple effect hit Riversend hard. My parents, who had invested their retirement savings into a high-risk fund managed by one of Travis's shell companies on his advice, lost everything. The bank foreclosed on the house on Elm Street, the house with the perfect hedges and the judgmental door. One rainy Tuesday, there was a knock on the door of my cottage at Langford Point. I opened it to find Gerald and Linda. They looked older, smaller. My father's suit was frayed at the cuffs. My mother was not wearing her pearls. "Natalie," my mother said, her voice thin. We did not know where else to go. The bank took the house. We are staying at a motel, but the money is running out." "We are family," my father said, though he could not meet my eyes. "We made mistakes, but the Bible says to forgive. We need help, Natalie, just until we get back on our feet." I stood in the doorway, the warmth of my home behind me. I could hear Eli laughing in the living room where he was playing a video game with Lucas. I looked at the people who had birthed me. I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger was gone. It had burned itself out, leaving only clarity. "I forgive you," I said. Their faces lit up with relief. "Oh, thank God," Linda breathed. "We knew you were a good Christian girl. If you could just loan us enough for a deposit on a condo." "No," I said, gentle but firm. They froze. "What?" "I forgive you for my own peace," I explained. "Not for your comfort. I remember the night I stood on your porch with a sick child. You told me I was not your daughter anymore. You chose your reputation over my life." "We were misled," Gerald argued. "You were cruel," I corrected him. "And cruelty has a price. I will not give you money. I will not pay your debts. If you get sick, I will pay your medical bills directly to the hospital, because I am a human being, but I will not save you from the consequences of your own greed." I closed the door. I did not slam it. I just closed it. A month later, the auction for the house on Elm Street was held. There was only one bidder. I bought it. I did not move in. Instead, I hired a crew to renovate it. We painted over the stark white siding with a warm, welcoming yellow. We tore out the prickly hedges and planted wildflowers. I hung a sign over the front porch, "The Haven." It became a transitional shelter for women leaving abusive marriages and children who had nowhere to go. I funded it with the bonus Lucas gave me and the settlement money from the lawsuit against Travis. On opening day, I drove past the house. I saw a young woman sitting on the porch swing, the same porch where I had cried in the rain. She was holding a sleeping toddler. She looked safe. My parents walked by on the sidewalk. They were living in a small assisted living facility downtown now. They stopped and looked at their old house. They saw the sign. They saw the people inside, safe and warm in the rooms they had once guarded so jealously. They looked at me in my car. I nodded to them once. They lowered their heads and walked on. They finally understood. The house was never the legacy. The love inside it was. The story ends on a Sunday afternoon in the park near the marina. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. Eli was kicking a soccer ball with a group of kids from the Haven. He looked healthy, tall, and happy. The shadows of the bridge were gone from his eyes. Lucas stood beside me, his hands in his pockets. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. "You know," Lucas said, watching Eli score a goal. "He asked me yesterday if he could change his name." "To what?" I asked. "Elias Pierce Langford," Lucas smiled. "He said he wants both." Eli ran over to us, breathless and sweating. He grabbed Lucas's hand, then he grabbed mine. "Did you see that?" he gasped. "I got it right past the goalie." "I saw," I said, smoothing his hair. "You are a natural." "I have a good team," Eli said, looking up at us. "I have two parents, one who gave me my life, and one who saved it. I knelt down and hugged him, burying my face in his shoulder. I smelled grass and sunshine, and the sweet scent of a future that almost did not happen. Family isn't just blood, I whispered to him, and to myself. It isn't about who looks like you or who shares your last name. Family are the people who stand next to you when the whole world turns its back. And honey, we are never turning back. I stood up, holding his hand, and we walked together toward the car, leaving the long, dark shadow of the past behind us. Finally stepping into the sun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of pain, betrayal, and ultimately, justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or relaxing at home? Please drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share more stories of resilience and truth with the world.